Okay, well, I guess the first thing we should do is to identify yourself.
Okay. My name is Andrew J. Hanson, and I'm the son of Alfred O. Hanson, who was at Los Alamos just having finished his PhD and coming down from Ray Herb's nuclear physics research group at Wisconsin.
Okay.
So he was working for his PhD on nuclear physics experiments that I don't know exactly, but with the Van de Graaff generator. So there were two Van de Graaff generators, the long tank and the short tank, was it? Anyway, there were two Van de Graaff generators at Wisconsin, and so he came down as one of the people from Ray Herb's group to use the long tank to measure neutron cross sections.
Okay.
So that was my father, and so I was born on February 22nd, 1944, in an apartment downstairs from the apartment then occupied by Hanson Rose Beta.
Really?
And I am referred to, but not by name, in Rose Beta's narrative as the big baby who was born downstairs.
Okay.
And in Rose Beta's interview, she makes some sort of a comment about how it's important, to have your baby late term and so on in order to have a large baby. In fact, I checked with my mother, who is still living, Elizabeth Hanson, age 97, in
Wow.
Urbana, Illinois, and she said I was 2 weeks premature.
But how much did you weigh? I mean, that rose.
I believe it was 10 pounds 4 ounces.
Ooh, wow.
This is at high altitude, mind you, where birth weights are lower, because Los Alamos is very high.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about 6,000 feet, I think.
That's 8,000.
5,000 feet, yeah. Okay, thank you, Dr. Hanson. And we also have here Dr.
Yeah, I'm Henry Frisch. Andy and I there are many parallels. My dad also was a graduate student in Ray Herb's group. I didn't know your father already had his degree. My dad didn't. Dave hadn't finished.
Your father had to go back and took his degree with Vicky Weisskopf.
With Vicky at MIT.
My dad was already done with Ray Herb.
Yeah. The group was basically hijacked to Los Alamos, and my mother was studying for a PhD, and I'm a little unclear as to what point she was. She already had a master's, I'm sure, but she was also a scientist, and so Rose Frisch, and she just passed away in January at age 96 and a half, or a little more. And so most of what I remember, and Andy and I were classmates in college. We skied together. We're still very good friends.
In the Harvard band together.
In the Harvard band together, yeah, that's right. He caused me almost to die of liquor poisoning at one point. I can tell you stories about Andy. But anyhow, there are lots of parallels. But our fathers worked together on the Van de Graaff. And actually, one of the questions I have that I'd like to ask this crowd is that we've seen a picture, and I'm sure I've seen it, of a flatbed large truck carrying the Van de Graaffs up the dirt road to the mesa with his father and my father on the back with the load out in the open. Mm-hmm. And that road was famously spectacular. Yeah, hairpin turns. It was dirt. Mm-hmm. So if you got too close to the edge, you lost it. And I would love to find that picture again. I've seen it. I even had it, I think, at one point.
So we spoke earlier yesterday to Richard Rhodes, and he said he remembers such a picture. He thinks it's in the Los Alamos archives, but neither Henry nor I currently know where a copy is if we have it someplace.
Yeah, we would love that picture, because I've had it. I may still have it.
You may still have it.
I may still have it.
All right. Well.
But so there's lots of parallelism. And what they were doing with the Van de Graaff was measuring neutron cross-sections on the very early samples of plutonium. They came very early to the hill. This was April 43, I think, is when they arrived. So there was almost nobody there.
Mm-hmm. It was very early.
It was very early. they were very young, and they were given very important jobs. And in fact, another question is, Andy has a story of his father in plutonium. You want to tell?
Okay, so this is a story that my mother told. I can't remember my father ever actually telling it, and I can't find any record of it. There is a record of a similar incident where a large quantity of the world supply of plutonium exploded out of an ampule, bounced off a wall and into someone's mouth.
Wow.
And that they were subsequently able to recover that plutonium.
Okay.
But that was not my father's
No.
incident. Apparently, according to my mother, and I have no verification of this, there was an incident where my father presumably was preparing what was at that time the world supply of metallic plutonium for use in the Van de Graaff in order to measure the cross-sections. It was very important to measure the cross-sections because previous knowledge of how fission would work had been done only with slow neutrons. And so they didn't know whether in the actual bomb scenario, whether the fast neutrons would behave the same way. So one of his jobs with the long tank Van de Graaff was to measure cross-sections with fast neutrons.
Okay.
And that was actually, as I understand it, one of the critical results of the entire project very early on.
Wow.
To discover that fast neutrons worked and did not, diffuse too quickly, and so that there was more than enough reactivity to sustain a chain reaction, which was unknown until they measured these results in the long tank Van de Graaff. Anyway, presumably he had to prepare this microscopic amount of plutonium to use as a target in order to make these measurements. And according to my mother, at one point he was heating it like on a hot plate or something in order to change its shape or do something, turned his back, and it boiled away.
Whoops.
Now, I don't know exactly how you do that without dying, because inhaling plutonium is
Very
relatively
bad for
lethal. And he lived until 90, so it wasn't something that happened right away if he was damaged by it. Although he did die of pancreatic cancer, which is associated with that kind of radiation. It just took a long time.
As did my dad.
As did Henry's dad. Both died of pancreatic cancer.
And how old was your father?
73.
73.
And mine was 90.
And yours was 90.
But it
Your
was
mother-
still very sudden pancreatic cancer onset. But anyway, so according to my mother, he essentially lost the world supply of plutonium. A crew of people already prepared to do this came in and recovered it from the walls and tables and chairs, and apparently most of it, and according to my mother, quote, they recovered all but a couple $1,000s worth, unquote. How she knew it was a couple $1,000s worth, I don't know. But anyway, my father apparently did this, had this mishap with the plutonium. Most of it was recovered so they could continue the experiments. And the other thing, which I did not know until I asked my mother very recently, is that the laboratory in which this happened was next door to Oppenheimer's office.
Oh dear.
And Oppenheimer heard about it immediately. And a couple of days later, there was a movie theater. So people would go on maybe Friday, Saturday night and go and watch a movie, because that was like the only recreation available on the base. And so a couple of days later, my mother and father were standing in line at the movie theater to get into the theater. And I believe, this is what she says, Oppie and Kitty were a couple people behind them in line. And she turned, and Oppenheimer was giving my dad the evilest evil eye you could imagine.
You lost the plutonium.
So that's my story.
Okay.
That's the source of one of my questions, which is, what was the source of that plutonium?
What was the source?
When they had micrograms of plutonium in early '43, and my dad
Could
was
have come
measuring
from-
cross sections
California from
the Calutron.
it could have been, if it was just this little tiny
It's
bit.
this tiny little bit, probably.
I think plutonium that was processed in the X-10 at Oak Ridge came a little later.
Yeah, well, that's the point. This is very early.
So this had to be from the California
It had to be from
Caltrans. This was Ernest Lawrence's.
Yes.
And I even think, just to add a little more, I'm not sure if it's the same amount, that General Groves was around at one point, and I think he asked Lawrence about the plutonium and was shown, a speck of it. And Groves could not believe that this is, I just spent X amount of millions of dollars and you have this little speck of plutonium.
And
this is all there is.
You're dead almost.
And then
To boil it away.
boil it away or
Were
lost
there
it.
multiple incidents involving ingestion and such of plutonium? I mean, like this?
Well, this is an accidental one.
Yeah, accident. Were there multiple? Because as Andy said, there was a reference to this
In a book.
in a book,
Yeah.
but his dad's story was
I've never heard that before, but
The one about the ingestion?
yeah.
Okay, not only was that in the book, but the reason I went and looked for it was that it appeared as the semi-fictional centerpiece of the Manhattan TV show episode. So the Manhattan TV show had an episode centering on this particular episode, and it was, when I checked on it to see whether possibly it could have been based on an elaboration of my father's incident, I found that there was a documented incident in this book that I found on the web. I found pages from the book, very, very close to the one that appeared in the Manhattan episode.
I do recall that when Hazel O'Leary was the secretary, that, and she was sort of beginning a kind of openness initiative and declassifying things like tests, how many tests did the Americans do. And there was a component of that where she talked about these plutonium experiments where people were purposely at hospitals.
That's right.
Given doses of plutonium to see what would happen, and there is a whole study of this that came out of this initiative by Hazel O'Leary.
Yeah. I was asking though about whether trying to track down a little of this history.
Right, and this one's a new one on me,
Okay.
but I'm sure.
Could I ask what building were the Van de Graaffs in, and what happened to them?
Do you know
And you
about
say it
those?
was next to Oppie's office.
Well,
there weren't many buildings at this
I'm
point.
not
They
sure
were
where the
building.
Van de Graaff was. That's where
the lab,
was
the
working with
preparation
material.
lab was.
Now I have a picture which I've sent to Alexander, who's the archivist here. This is a picture of my dad at the controls of the long tank. And that picture must be in the Los Alamos archives as well, because it says it's an
Great
official.
picture.
It says it's
He
an
looks so
official.
young.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
he was,
they were.
He was 30. He was born in 1914, so this was.
They were all young.
1914.
And
Yeah.
you were the youngest.
I wanted to ask about another accident, which I just told Charles Oppenheimer about. So my mom worked with Kitty in the blood lab,
Okay.
and Oppenheimer's son, Peter, so Charles's father, was 3 or 4, flushed Kitty's badge down the toilet. Now the sewage, my mom told me, all ran out of a single pipe or into a canyon. But you couldn't leave Kitty's badge outside the fence. So a squad was detached
To go search
to go search
for the badge.
for the badge. Now
That's a
this
good
had to be, if you had it in for somebody. Right.
You'd put them on this.
You would put this. You would immediately
Go find
decide-
that badge.
You would make a list of who should go find this badge. So anyhow, I told that to Charles, but I don't know if this was true or not. But my mom told me, and so I'm sure it was. There was a related thing to the cross sections, and I don't know at what point this happened. And maybe I'm a high energy physicist, and the field has gone pretty crazy about estimating uncertainties. You quote a number, you measure a number, and then you spend the next 2 years working on getting the uncertainties right, whether they matter or not.
Mhm.
And generally they don't. So at that level, you can make a good guess. So my dad told me that there was an all-hands meeting called by Oppie in which Fermi was going to announce the multiplication factor. Neutron. Did your dad ever talk about this?
I don't remember this.
So my dad said it was the front row, was Bohr, Beta, it was
The big guys, yeah.
the big guys, the luminaries, and they were all there. And Oppenheimer stood up and said, this is a very happy occasion. I've got a very important announcement to make. Enrico is going to announce the multiplication factor, I presume for plutonium.
Must have been early on. Huh?
This must have been very early.
Very early.
Yeah.
At some of these seminars, maybe.
Well, no, it was a special meeting.
A special meeting.
And Oppenheimer said, this is really a great occasion. I'll let Enrico. I'll tell you. So Fermi stands up and he says, the number is, I'm making this up, 2.3.
Yeah.
And sits down. And Oppenheimer, everybody applauds and such, and Oppie says, I can't tell you how important this is. This says that it's going to work. We will, so forth and so on. He says, however, Enrico, you've told us the number, but you haven't told us an uncertainty on it. What is the uncertainty on the number? Fermi stands up and says, I do not know, but don't worry about it. It's going to work. Sits down.
Well,
So Oppenheimer says, Enrico, that's not really an answer. We need to know the number. Tell us the number. And Fermi says, I know. So, and my dad said, at that point, Oppenheimer got very frosty. And he said, I have been charged by the President of the United States with this project. In the future, the free world may depend on this. And I cannot go to the President of the United States and tell him it's going to work.
Not to worry about it.
Yeah, not to worry about it. If you can't tell me the uncertainty, at least can you put a limit on the uncertainty? And my father said at this point, Fermi stood up, grinned ear to ear, and said the uncertainty is not smaller than 0.1. And sat down. It's the wrong limit.
Well,
you'd like to know that the uncertainty is not larger than something.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a completely useless number. So Fermi grinned, he wasn't. And at that point, my dad said,
what can you do with this guy?
Yeah.
Well, they called him the Pope, and he was a pretty smart guy.
He was a very smart
A very
so
smart
that
guy.
was so, but that raises a question in my mind. Did this meeting happen? I'm sure it did. My dad was there. Is it recorded?
Right.
Who else was there? I'd like to know more, because this is a really great story about the uncertainties and about the Fermi interaction with others. But I've never heard.
All right.
I've never heard
More about it.
Heard it described.
Okay. Well, that deserves to be looked into. There's a wonderful book called Critical Assembly by a woman, historian of science, Hodgson.
Oh, by Lillian. Yeah.
Lillian.
Yeah. I know her, of course.
And her book
Right.
may have this account, because she did use all of the Los Alamos.
Right, and she had
documents.
access to Bob Wilson.
And if you mention this to her, I think she's
that's-
moved on to other things, but
Yeah,
still.
that's a good point.
But if you contacted her,
Yeah.
and you know her,
I know her.
with this incident, she may know about it and may know, oh yes, this is documented.
No, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
So I think I had a question that, another one that Henry and I discussed that relates to a narrative I got from my mother just quite recently. She sent me an email regarding her experience on the day of the Trinity shot.
Okay.
And so what she said is, reviewing the test shot as your dad told it to me and as I experienced it. This is from my mother, Elizabeth Hanson.
Mm-hmm.
She said, Al was there as a scientist observer.
Mm-hmm.
A soldier had been assigned a small ground experiment of some kind to take place 10,000 yards north of ground zero. I don't remember who, but there was a joker among the senior scientists who had been going around scaring the soldiers about what was going to happen, and the soldier assigned the ground experiment refused it. Whereupon my dad, Al, was assigned to step in to take his place, or it says Al stepped in to take his place. Maybe he wasn't assigned, maybe he volunteered. And then it says the test shot went off, and the radioactive cloud started to blow northward. He was at this station 10,000 yards north in his direction, and apparently the command center sent a jeep to pick him up and take him away from the drifting cloud. That much I remember, but I had thought that he was in a bunker at some point with dark glasses, and that part my mother does not remember, but I kind of remember my dad mentioning some other elaborations upon this particular situation, but for sure the cloud blew over him, or towards him, and he was raced up out of the area.
Frightening.
But there's more.
Sorry.
So then the morning, this was July 16th?
July 16th.
Yeah. So that morning, my father had disappeared. He wasn't there in the house. But of course, as I said, we lived downstairs from the Betas. So my mother went out into the front yard for some reason, and she says that Rose Beta was standing there looking off into the distance, and Rose turned to her and said simply, quote, "It worked," unquote.
She saw it. She saw the light.
So my mother said that this was the first time that she knew that it had been about something that could work or not. And later in the day, a pickup truck pulled up at her house, and Al got off. He looked a little strange and seemed whitish, as if dusted with flour. And she didn't know whether that was from sand or from something else, but he had a white
and coated with
white. It looked whitish, as though he were dusted with flour. So my question is, and I hope this isn't getting anybody in trouble many decades later, but how did Rose know? In other words,
she must have seen it.
We don't know.
How did she know to look at 5:30 in the morning of?
Was she up at 5:30 looking? So we have this other story of the people in the discussion yesterday that said they were walking along the street, looked south, and all of a sudden the sun rose in
and
the
they
south.
were looking.
So you could see it from there. So clearly, if someone had known to get up and look out, they could have seen it, the sun rise in the south. But we have no idea whether Rose actually saw that or whether someone told her someone.
Right.
That's right. So at an Erice in 1970 or thereabouts, Ellen Weisskopf said she didn't know, that Vicky didn't tell anything. And Jane said, "Oh, Bobby told me everything. We would lie in bed Jane was explicit enough that there was all us youngsters in the audience were cringing a little bit, right, because of your pillow talk with. She said, "Oh, Bob told me everything," and such. So I think there was
some of that, and the question of why get up at 5:30 in the morning. I mean, many of the men had disappeared. I mean, they had left, right? I mean, they had gone down.
Well, I think
Trinity.
some wives knew and some wives didn't.
Somewhat, yeah.
So there, and Jim Nolan was the
Doctor.
Captain Nolan was the doctor, and his grandson is here.
Oh, really?
Jim, yeah, and so we've been telling stories because Nolan played a very important role in many aspects. But as for personal things, he delivered me and both of us.
He delivered both of us. Are you going to tell the
Yeah,
story?
so I was asked to be the house physicist for the Chicago Big Opera Company, Lyric Opera. It's a major opera company, and they do, it's on the scale of the matter or something. It's a big deal. So they did John Adams' Dr. Atomic.
Right.
And they needed a physicist, and I had been on the TV talking for the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, and so they called me. So we held the cast party in the accelerator high bay where Fermi cyclotron was at the Enrico Fermi Institute at the University of Chicago. So the big shielding blocks are still there, the 100-ton crane, right across from where CP1, the first pile, was, right across the street. This is where the Met Lab was. So we held the cast party, and so I went up afterwards. It was a wonderful production, but I found the young singer who played Captain Nolan.
Uh-huh.
And we were all having a very good time. Norm Ramsey was there. Only time I'd ever heard Norm talk about the use of the bomb. So Ramsey, Jim Cronin spoke, John Adams spoke, Peter Sellers spoke. Good times. I go up to Nolan and I said, I just wanted to know that you delivered me.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't parse it. It sounded religious, right? I mean, this is a born-again experience. Somehow I had some epiphany in the opera.
You delivered me.
You delivered me. But then I explained, I said, you were the doctor. You were the doctor
when I was born.
And it was a shock to him because he had been immersed in this part. But the fact that he had really been a doctor delivering babies, and Jim Nolan here said his grandfather delivered at least 80 babies. I mean, I know Groves complained.
I know. No,
yeah.
Stop it, yeah, this
yeah.
I think we can't handle all those babies.
That's right. So let's see.
I remembered it slightly differently because you sent me pictures of the party at the old pile site.
Well, not the bus site, at the cyclotron site.
At the cyclotron site. And then you invited Pat and me up for the opening night. You got us tickets for the opening night, and very, very unusual. We were, the four of us, Henry, his wife, and me, and my wife, were invited as guests to the opening night gala banquet, not at the,
right, at Lyric.
At Lyric Opera. And it was there that I remember walking up to the actor who played Captain Nolan, presenting the fact that
you delivered me too.
You delivered me as a baby, and then he made some wisecrack like you look older now, something to that effect.
Yeah, that was after the
after the actual opera.
The cast party that
That was before the opera.
Because there were multiple.
But there's a wonderful crew. They were so up and so enthusiastic.
It was such a good performance.
Well,
so they've decorated the high bay, the cyclotron bay, and there's a big picture of the shack, the guard gate house, and a big picture of Don Hornig up in the
on the tower.
On the tower.
Yeah,
enormous picture, the size of that wall or something. And one of the things that I was told about Hornig is that at first he was very frightened. He's up in a shack with a nuclear weapon that's nothing but a big antenna in terms of ground loops and pickup and such in an electrical storm.
Lightning's going off.
Lightning's going all around. This thing has got to be the world's biggest antenna for picking up sparks. He's been given a sidearm, if I remember, to protect himself. But I was told that at some point he realized that there was no point being frightened because he would never know.
Yeah, he'd be gone. He'd be gone.
But the picture of the gate, and I don't know whether I read this or was told this or such. It may have been my dad or somebody told it that. I think my dad told me this. That at the gate, Fermi and Bohr show up. And Fermi signs Mr. Farmer. Do you know this story?
Go ahead. I think so.
Yeah. Fermi signs Mr. Farmer, because that's who he was. And Bohr never could remember who he was. So
Baker.
Bohr has to look.
Baker. Yeah.
And he sees Baker, and he writes down Baker. And the guard at the gate, some young GI, says, "Are you really Mr. Baker?" And Fermi says, "Look, I've known him for many years." He says, "And if his name's not Baker, mine's not Farmer."
And Fermi there was another incident where his escort, he always had somebody with him, a guy named Bodino, John Bodino. He was Italian. They spoke Italian together. They got along.
Like tennis together, probably.
And he says about Bodino, he says, "Well, soon Johnny's going to need an escort as well, because he knows so much top secret stuff that he's going to need somebody to take care of him. So, no, I mean, Fermi's a good one here.
Was there a third bomb? Everybody's talking about it.
Well, the three bombs that Alex was talking about was Trinity, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki.
There also was a third bomb on Tinian.
There was a third bomb ready to go.
Yes.
General Groves, at that point, had a supply of plutonium from Hanford coming at the rate of about 1 every 10 days. So the next plutonium bomb would have been ready, he told Marshall, August 17th or 18th.
I see. But were there parts on Tinian?
And there was enough on Tinian to assemble it. All they needed was the plutonium.
Was the plutonium.
Groves, we don't know how long this is going to go on. I will have as many bombs as you need all the way to
Okay,
all the way
that
to Christmas.
explains. Because there's a guy in Chicago whose mother was a nurse on Tinian
Okay.
and shared a beach with the scientists. The
All right.
nurses, right out of Catch-22, right? You've got her stuck at
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nurse so-and-so.
And she knew about the third bomb.
Yeah.
So let's see. There was one other.
There would have been more. And
That I knew, but I didn't know whether there was really one close to ready to go on Tinian.
No, I didn't know that either. That's news to me.
And her claim was that those parts ended up in the ocean.
maybe some of the casings might
Some
have.
of the casing.
Because they practiced with these.
Well, I have a piece of a practice casing in my office. So I had one other thing that I wanted to ask here, and then, I don't know, Andy, do you want to talk?
I had one more set of
Why
notes.
don't you go
from my
first?
mom.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I did get a handwritten note from my mother that reminds me, and I must have seen this, that there is a book published by the Los Alamos Historical Society called Behind Tall Fences, and that in that there is a memoir by my father, Al Hanson.
Okay.
So that tells some of his history in his words,
Good.
which I don't have here. And then a couple more things that she reminds me of. She said at the beginning his work was with the long tank to get the research on neutron cross-section started. She says that he helped build the platform for the Trinity shot, and apparently stayed at night in the Alamogordo barracks while he was helping to build the platform. I did not know that. That was news to me.
I should just say my dad also was down there working on the tower. Working on the tower.
Okay, so they were both down there.
I think they were both. I mean,
Helping to build the
he
tower.
talked about.
Okay, so they were both there.
I think so.
Now, and then I've already mentioned my dad being 10,000 yards from north from ground zero at a test site. Did you know where your dad was? Was he out there?
He was in a bunker. I'm pretty sure. And then, if my memory is correct, and I wish I had asked more, he came out. He was one of the first to go in some kind of vehicle.
Up closer than 10,000 yards?
Closer than the bunker.
Tank or armored personnel.
And I've lost the glasses he saw the blast with. I had them.
Yeah, those
And, with the side shields and such, and I feel really badly. But I had those, but I never really asked enough questions.
And the last thing my mom says was that at Los Alamos, I guess the parts for Fat Man and the Nagasaki bomb were assembled and confirmed at Los Alamos. Is that correct?
Well, they would have checked out the plutonium, that it was okay.
So what it says is at Los Alamos, Al was given the task of making final measurements that okayed the material for the Nagasaki bomb.
Okay. And then it was transported. To Tinian and assembled there and put on the plane and dropped.
And Nolan went with it, right? That's
on the
Independence,
US Indiana.
Independence.
Indianapolis.
Yeah,
Indianapolis, yeah.
Nolan was with a guy named Robert Furman. You ever come across that name?
Yeah.
He couldn't have been closer to Groves. Groves gave him all sorts of responsibilities. And one of the responsibilities was to take the uranium
Right.
with Nolan
With Nolan.
On the
On the
USS
Indianapolis.
On the Indianapolis, yeah.
And
Plutonium.
it's recounted in my book, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And they get off and take off the uranium and the other casings for the little boy and all that. And the Indianapolis goes on and of course gets
Right.
sunk, and it's
Yeah.
the worst naval tragedy of World War II
Right.
with
Yeah,
people.
that's a whole story.
shot. Yeah, that's a horrible thing.
Horrible.
So, but Nolan, at that point, is on Tinian
Right,
with Furman.
right. So I had one other thing, I've been going through.
Yeah, we're just about
we're
done
just
here.
about done.
Another 5 minutes.
One other thing, I've been going through some of my dad's papers from this time.
Good.
And there's a set between July 45 and September 45 that span the August dates that are related to the Chicago poll, to the use of the bomb. I mean, my dad was on the Alaska committee, I think it was. So the committee at Los Alamos decided this.
Right.
My dad was very young. I mean, he's still a student, doesn't have a PhD yet. And this was a distinguished bunch, but he clearly was already very active in these moral and sort of large questions.
Questioning
Questioning
use.
Questioning the use and planning the use. I have the results of the Chicago poll, and it says there are 170 respondents, and then there were, I think, 5 or 6 choices. Only 15% were for an active use on a city population.
Surprise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was wartime, so I don't know. But knowing more about how the scientists reacted during all this. I just know from my mother's, I asked my mother what happened when the bombs were dropped. And she said, we left. We all left. And the implication was that it hadn't turned out the way they had thought it would. And there was some, I don't know about bitterness, but there had been a lot of planning and a lot of discussion among very sophisticated people at very high levels. I have things labeled top secret to Bradbury and others. And basically, I think none of that counted at all, quite as you can well imagine.
No.
But knowing more about that history of the internal discussions with Oppenheimer and others would be very interesting.
Okay. I think some of that is written up.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I don't know if you were there.
No, it's not involved in that.
Okay, well that was.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That was-
All right. Okay. This is, fascinating topic, and now we have it on film, and Cindy will make good use of it, I think.
I'll go find your book.